Breathe easy. The importance of respiratory protection, breathing clean air. It's something most of us take for granted, but for a lot of folks out there getting their hands dirty, it's a luxury. We're talking about the men and women working in environments where the air itself can be a hazard. Factories, construction sites, mines, you name it. That's where Respiratory Protection Systems, or RPS, come in. These aren't just pieces of equipment, they're a lifeline, a barrier between a hardworking individual and a whole lot of nasty stuff that could put them down for the count. Because at the end of the day, knowing your RPS could be the difference between a healthy workday and a trip to the hospital. Alright, let's start with the basics. Disposable respirators. You know the type? Those lightweight masks you see everywhere these days, especially in hospitals and on construction sites. They're like the workhorses of the RPS world. Simple, effective, and you guessed it, disposable. Now don't let the disposable part fool you. These masks might not look like much, but they pack a punch when it comes to filtering out airborne particles. We're talking about dust, pollen, mold spores, the kind of stuff that can really mess up your respiratory system if you're breathing it in day after day. You'll typically see these masks labeled as N95, N99, or P100. Those letters and numbers, they're not just random gibberish. They tell you exactly how good the mask is at filtering out particles. The higher the number, the better the protection. An N95 mask, for example, filters out at least 95% of airborne particles. But here's the catch with disposable respirators. They're designed for short-term use. Think of them like a good pair of work gloves. They'll protect your hands for a while, but eventually, they're going to wear out and you'll need a new pair. Same goes for these masks. Once they get dirty, damaged, or breathing through them becomes difficult, toss them and grab a fresh one. And here's a pro tip. Make sure you're getting a good seal around your nose and mouth. If air can sneak in around the edges, the mask isn't doing its job. Most disposable respirators have adjustable nose pieces to help you get that snug fit. Don't be afraid to adjust it until it feels right. Just remember, disposable respirators are your first line of defense against airborne hazards. If you're dealing with heavy concentrations of dust, fumes, or vapors, you're going to need something a little more heavy-duty. Alright, folks, let's talk about stepping up your respiratory protection game. When those disposable masks just ain't cutting it, it's time to bring in the big guns half mask and full-face respirators. These are the respirators that say, I'm serious about protecting my lungs. Now you can tell just by looking at these respirators that they mean business. Half-mask respirators cover your nose and mouth, while full-face respirators, you guessed it, cover your entire face. They're made from more durable materials like silicone or rubber, and they create a tighter seal against your face, which is crucial when you're dealing with more hazardous stuff in the air. But here's the real game changer with these respirators. They use replaceable cartridges or filters that are specifically designed to target different types of airborne hazards. You see, not all air contaminants are created equal. Some are particles like dust and asbestos, while others are gases and vapors like paint fumes or chlorine. That's where the cartridges come in. Each cartridge is filled with a specific type of filter material that traps or neutralizes a particular hazard. So if you're working with paint fumes, you'd use a cartridge designed for organic vapors. If you're dealing with chlorine gas, you'd need a cartridge specifically designed for that. Now here's the thing about these cartridges. They don't last forever. Just like a sponge can only soak up so much water before it needs to be wrung out, these cartridges can only absorb or neutralize so much of a contaminant before they need to be replaced. So how do you know when it's time for a new cartridge? Well, most cartridges have a service life indicator that will tell you when they're spent. But the best way to know for sure is to use your senses. If you start to smell or taste the contaminant you're trying to filter out, it's a sure sign that your cartridge is exhausted and it's time for a fresh one. And let me tell you folks, trusting your senses is crucial when it comes to respiratory protection. Don't just rely on a timer or a gauge. If something doesn't smell right, or if you start to feel dizzy or lightheaded, get out of there and get some fresh air immediately. Your life could depend on it. Chapter 3. Now let's talk about those times when you need the best of the best when it comes to respiratory protection. We're talking about environments where the air is so hazardous, so chock full of nasty stuff, that even a full-face respirator with the fanciest cartridges just won't cut it. That's where powered air-purifying respirators, or PAPRs, come in. These bad boys are like the Cadillac of respirators. They take everything we've talked about so far and crank it up to 11. Imagine this, a battery-powered blower that draws air through a high-efficiency filter and delivers it directly to your face mask or hood. That's a PAPR in a nutshell. Now you might be thinking, Mike, that sounds like overkill. Do I really need a battery-powered air purifier strapped to my back? Well, that depends. Are you working in a confined space with limited ventilation? Are you dealing with highly toxic chemicals or biological agents? If you answered yes to either of those questions, then a PAPR might be just what the doctor ordered. One of the biggest advantages of PAPRs is the level of comfort they provide. Because the blower is doing all the work of pulling air through the filter, you don't have to work as hard to breathe. This is especially important if you're wearing a respirator for extended periods or if you have any existing respiratory issues. Another advantage of PAPRs is that they can provide a higher level of protection than other types of respirators. This is because the blower creates a positive pressure inside the mask or hood, which helps to prevent contaminants from leaking in. But with all that power and protection comes a little more responsibility. PAPRs require regular maintenance to ensure they're working properly. Trust me, the last thing you want is for your PAPR to fail when you need it most. Chapter 4. All right, folks, we've covered a lot of ground today, from your basic disposable masks to the high-tech PAPRs. But now it's time to talk about the heavy hitters of the respiratory protection world, supplied air respirators, or SARs. These are the respirators you see firefighters and hazmat teams wearing, and for a good reason. When it comes to breathing protection, SARs are the top of the food chain. Now, unlike the other respirators we've talked about, SARs don't rely on filters to remove contaminants from the air. Instead, they provide a direct supply of clean, breathable air from a remote source. Think of it like an underwater diver's air supply, but instead of being submerged, you're working in an environment where the air itself is toxic. There are two main types of SARs: airline respirators and self-contained breathing apparatuses, SCBAs. Airline respirators are connected to a continuous supply of air, usually from a compressor or compressed air cylinder located a safe distance away. SCBAs, on the other hand, have their own self-contained air supply, usually in the form of a high-pressure air tank worn on the user's back. The type of SOR you need depends on the specific hazards you're facing and the work environment. Airline respirators are a good option for jobs that require extended periods of respiratory protection, while SCBAs are more suitable for situations where mobility and a readily available air supply are crucial, like firefighting or hazmat response. Now, SRs might seem like the ultimate solution for respiratory protection, and in many ways they are, but they also come with their own set of limitations and considerations. For starters, SARs can be bulky and restrict your movement, especially SCBAs with those big air tanks. They also require specialized training to use safely and effectively. You need to know how to check your air supply, monitor your gauges, and respond to emergencies. Another thing to keep in mind is that SRs are only as good as their air supply. If your air hose gets cut or your air tank runs out, you're in trouble. That's why it's crucial to always have a backup plan and to never rely solely on a SAR for your respiratory protection. So, the next time you see someone wearing a respirator, take a moment to appreciate the fact that they're taking their health and safety seriously. And if you're ever in a situation where you need respiratory protection, don't hesitate to ask for it. Remember, folks, breathing is a privilege, not a right, especially in some of the jobs we tackle. Thanks for watching. If you found this information useful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more safety insights.